Say a little word about my long-time relationship with Jose. We first met around 10 o'clock this morning. Actually, it was more like 9. So forgive me for reading the introduction. So Jose is a senior sustainability scientist at the Global Institute for Sustainability at Arizona State University. He's a member of the Urban Scaling Group. I think that's the name of it, from the Santa Fe Institute. And that was actually the work that caught our eye, and I think it was a mutual collaborator that introduced us an email. He's interested in determinants of metropolitan economic performance, so his background is physics and economics, which is not typical. It's a mix. Yes. No. And location-specific economic growth. He's also interested in the application of machine learning, data mining, and spatial statistics methods to the study of socioeconomic data, and the causes and consequences of urban size and scale, something he's going to talk more about today, and how the characteristics of individuals, organizations, institutions, and social networks interact to create regions of innovation. So with that, I want to welcome Jose, and I think you'll find this talk to be delightful.
Okay, thank you everyone for the chance to talk with you. This might be a somewhat unusual talk in that the work I'm going to talk about has certainly been made possible through data. It's not going to be so much a talk about data, although at the end I will mention what I think are some data challenges. What I'd like to try to do today is sort of give you a quick tour of an effort that has been going on for about a decade that has as its goal the construction of a theory of cities. As Charlie mentioned, my early training was in physics, which means that in the privacy of my bedroom at night, I fantasize about building formal, elegant, simple, and predictive models for human behavior. We can all have our fantasies, but you're you believe that we ought to be able to do this. Yes, human beings are complicated, they have hopes and dreams and aspirations, but still, why can we not do for humans what we do for fundamental particles? Why not? What we really need? Well, that's our fantasy. And in a sense, that's some of the spirit, maybe misguidedly so, that has been behind this work that I will describe. That has been but before, so let's just raise some themes that have been behind this work. The first thing that I don't think we need to go into a lot of the time is the importance of cities and city as a unit of analysis. Certainly, the city as a topic of study has been around for many, many years and decades, but it seems that recently the city as a topic has captured the imagination of lots of scientists and certainly policymakers. Is it possible, is it desirable to build a theory of science of cities? Okay, I will talk, then the bulk of the talk will be about the work that has led us, some of us, to give a qualified yes as an answer to the second question. Then I will want to touch on something that perhaps you have sometimes wondered as you brush your teeth. Why don't chimpanzees build cities? And we do. Anybody ever asked themselves that question? When you think about it, it's an interesting question, given that there are so many similarities between us and chimpanzees. Okay? I mean, of course, there are a lot of things that are very different. But one thing for sure that's very different is that they do not agglomerate in the way we agglomerate. And there's some interesting reasons for that, which get into why other cities to begin with. Okay? And then perhaps at the end conclude with what are some of the data limitations, which I argue are quite severe, that are hindering our ability to understand cities to the extent that we would like to. Because we will all agree that hopefully if we really understood cities better, perhaps that might influence policy making. Okay? And behind those themes, there are a lot of very specific questions. Okay? Some of them I will get into, starting with just what will the science of cities be like? If you had a science of cities, would you recognize it? Okay? And as mentioned, this is work that has been going on over the past decade. There's a variety of papers. Sorry. Please don't worry that in. Sorry, no. And I will be talking primarily about the work of this group, centered around the Santa Fe Institute, although not all of us are based at SFI. And when you look at this list of participants, yes, most of the people in this list are physicists. Okay, that has both its plus and its minuses, but not everyone in this list are physicists. And we, of course, have been engaged in a discussion with many other researchers who are not formally part of the Santa Fe Institute, who are also interested in cities, Richard Florida, Paul Romer, and New York University, many others. Okay, so the work I'm about to present is not mine, but it has born out of this decade-long effort to try to understand cities, and of course, the necessary and obligatory finance to the people who actually pay the checks or write the checks.
Just a quick question before you get too much.
Please, you can ask.
Okay.
You can interrupt me if you want.
For the purposes of this talk or this study, how are you defining a city?
I was afraid someone was going to ask that question.
Sorry.
And we are going to leave that alone for a while.
Okay.
Okay? Similarly to how if you were to ask a physicist in the 19th century, what is energy? Who would have said, you know, let's leave that aside for a while. So there's the physicist's answer. Let's study a phenomenon even though we cannot define it precisely. Or I can invoke the logic of that. I believe there was once a US judge who has to defining pornography said, I cannot do it, but we'll know when I see it. Okay? So for now, we will leave a very crucial question until the end. At the end, I hope to say something about that. So as I say, bunch of papers about this work. And initially, of course, not surprisingly, the bulk of our work was very empirical, was very phenomenological. And I don't use phenomenology as a bad term or as an insult. You need good phenomenology if you're going to build good models. Most recently, we have tried to build models to explain or generate the data. Okay? So again, no need to go into why cities matter, not for this audience. But I would like to at least point out to us that you can think of humanity as having been involved in this experiment or project that began about 10,000 years ago. You know, the question you ask is very important if you want to answer a separate question. How old is the first city? You know, where was the first city? Which presumes you have some notion of identifying them. I think the current understanding is that about 10,000 years ago, give or take 2,000, human beings began to build these things that seem to be recognizable as cities. And this is an experiment that in about 40, 50 more years will come to an end. In about 40 to 50 years, most human beings will live in cities. And that will be a remarkable change for our species. We will be an urban species. So I argue, and I think you will agree, that almost any problem that interests you that has to do with humans, the environment, sustainability, climate change, poverty reduction, so on and so forth, really are urban questions. Okay? So you will think that it might be a good idea for us to understand cities, since we are now an urban species. Okay? Now, the importance of cities has been recognized as for many years, now decades, by a variety of disciplines. Certainly, urban economists or economic geographers have not had a monopoly of being interested in cities. And there's a tremendous amount of work from a variety of disciplinary perspectives, sociology, archaeology, anthropology, economics for sure, that have studied cities. And many disciplines have contributed to what you might think is a vast store of knowledge about cities, what makes them tick, what makes some cities function or make them resilient over time, what makes some cities prosperous, what makes some cities prosperous for a while, then enter economic decline. Why is it so hard to revert economic decline in cities? That is not for lack of trying. And certainly, you don't need a PhD or equations to write some of the most influential writings on cities. Okay? And many of you in this room probably have read Jane Jacobs, who single-handedly is probably the most influential writer or thinker about cities in North America in the 20th century. And She did not need fancy math to generate a lot of insights. Okay? We can also get into a discussion as to whether she has been too influential, but that's for another day. So certainly, it does not seem to be controversial to argue or believe that the city as a thing, as a phenomenon, deserves to be its own unit of analysis. This is certainly the argument that Paul Romer and Richard Florida are making. And you know, Paul goes even a little further. He's an economist, very well-known economist, one of the parents of what came to be known as the New Growth Theory. And he argues that we humans need an academic effort about cities similar to what happened with firms circa 1950. Meaning, in the 1950s, if you were a CEO of a firm and you were faced with very pressing questions of how to organize your firm, how should you organize your shop floor, how should your firm be organized, how should you conduct your R&D policy, what should your wage policy be, should you have office or cubicles or have everybody in the basement? And you had gone to economists. Economists would have had nothing to tell you. It was just not part, ironically, or surprisingly, most economists didn't have much to say about firms as concrete entities. And that was one of the big motivations for the development of the high-end business schools in the United States. Harvard Business School, Wharton, the one in Chicago. And where the firm, as a thing, as a phenomenon, was not seen as exclusive domain of economists. It was seen as something interesting, something that's very important. Whoever has something to say or contribute about it, come and say it. And so Paul argued that we need a similar effort about cities, and I will certainly agree. But we are making a more ambitious goal statement. We're being bold, which means we can be horrendously wrong. But it's one thing to say the city is its own unit of analysis. What some of us are saying, the city admits of having its own theory, its own science, that will be synthetic, that will try to integrate a lot of data, a lot of insights, a lot of perspectives, that will be formal framework. Yes, that will be quantitative. And yes, here's sort of the old-fashioned physicist in me. And the proof of the pudding will be, if it's a good theory, if it's a beautiful theory, it will allow you to make predictions, that you can match them with data, the predictions survive, but more excitingly, it will tell you to look for new things that you have not looked for before, and you will find them. I take the old-fashioned view that that's the ultimate test of a theory. Not can it match existing data, that's hard, that's not the test. Can it tell you to go and look for something new? Can it tell you, measure something different about cities that you have not been measuring before? Now, so what I try to do is kind of build the motivation, the intuition, so to speak, of why some of us began to do this work from the perspective of scaling analysis, which was an analytical perspective borrowed, yes, from physics. Okay? And we are not going to get into the very detailed mathematical issues. More than, if you have some time this afternoon, I'm going to be around so we can talk about them. But I do want to capture some of the intuition. And some of the intuition starts out by this realization, getting to your question, that although we cannot define seeds, you will probably all find the following question, the following statement meaningful. If I were to tell you, in 1519, Hernán Cortés and his little band of mainly illiterate Spaniards walked into Tenochtitlan, and they recognized it as a city. And I tell you, Tenochtitlan was a city. That was the capital of the Aztec Empire. Now, you probably know enough that the Aztecs lived very differently from how we live today. They had their own specific rituals. Yes, they had a soft spot for human sacrifice. We don't do it anymore, I think, okay? There were many, many different things from how Cortés lived. He walked into Tenochtitlan and said, I know this is a city. And actually, at the time, it happened to be larger than any city where he came from. We find that statement meaningful. We even find it meaningful to talk about the Mesopotamian urban system of 8,000 years ago. Again, if you think about it, that's kind of striking. You think about the ancient Mesopotamians and how they live, how we live. You think about when you live in the city of Chicago. So the statement, Chicago is a city, and you are, one of the earliest Mesopotamian cities, was a city. And you find that meaningful. Of course, you start unpacking the details, well, what exactly was in common between Chicago and They have streets, they have neighborhoods, they have public squares, they have public buildings, they have places where you can keep your cattle, which I got Chicago does not do anymore. Okay, yes, many things were different, but we have this intuition that there were some underlying processes, something was going on in Chicago today, in about 9,000 years ago, that make it meaningful to say there were cities then, there were cities today. If you share that intuition, if that seems obvious to you, well, the thing is to try to unpack, well, what is it? What was going on in Tenochtitlan, and in and in Chicago? What's going on in Cape Town today in South Africa? That might be common. And on the basis of those commonalities, they're going to identify processes that will lead you to build a theory. So that's the intuition. Now, of course, one perspective can be, and I respect it, I disagree with it. Someone could say, look, the ways in which Tenochtitlan in 1519 and Chicago are cities, it's so superficial that when you actually get to unpack the details, they were so different that it's not meaningful to think that there could be a generative model for these two phenomena. Okay? And I think that would probably be a perspective that many social scientists take, and I don't think it's an unreasonable one. The burden of proof is on us to believe, no, there is something common that we can capture, that we can measure, that we can model, and then let's see. So this is not the first time in the social sciences you have this tension between how much of the details you need to capture or respect. Because any attempt to make a model means that you're going to leave aside some details. But you always worry about, well, if you leave out too many details, your model becomes simply a beautiful abstraction. And we have to play to those components.
Yeah, what strikes me is essential when you're talking about things is that there is something to the nature of like, a theory of agglomeration, or like networks, scale, or identity. But it strikes me that doesn't necessarily scale to the size of the city. Where I could say there are the social identity, economic dynamics of a given neighborhood within Chicago, and selecting a given neighborhood in Chicago, even though it is geographically proximate to other networks, that may be something that is most identifiably similar, not to other parts of Chicago, but to another city, like Midwestern or otherwise. So, as you're kind of talking this through, do you really, per se, have in mind, Chicago as a unit, that's a unity, or, that, like, thinking of Chicago as an agglomeration is kind of, equivalent to thinking of, like, other scales of agglomeration?
We'll revisit that question in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, meaning, but that's the challenge. But to your question present very much the challenge of building a model. Meaning, what is it that you're going to try to capture as general? So you can say, well, I have a model that encompasses Chicago, Tenochtitlan, New York City, Boston, somewhere in the city where I was born, Puerto Rico. Well, what are you going to be capturing? What are you going to leave behind? So let's see if I can persuade you that there's some awesome reasons to believe that there is enough in common to build a model. But let's see. So the beginning of constructing any model, any theory, is that there have to be empirical regularities. Again, that might be a controversial view, but okay. I mean, there has to be something in common. That moment when you look at the data, you say, oh, there's something going on in here. It seems to be not an accident of space, of location, or time. It's not an artifact of the instrument I'm using to measure it. There's something out there. And on the basis of those regularities, which you need to establish are first robust enough, you then allow yourself to fantasize, I can build a theory. And in the case of scaling, that salient characteristic is population size. If you think about it, one of the most salient features of a city, of any city, is its population. And in fact, for a long time, urban economists, urban sociologists, economic geographers, archaeologists have recognized that population size and it's very close relative, population density. And population size and population density are very closely related. Not just obviously because they have to do with population, but the relationship between increasing density and increasing size. They have recognized that it's very important. And there has been a very fascinating debate, at least for 40 years. Is population size for a city, for a village, for a settlement, is population size a consequence of things going on that give you a certain population size? Or is population size itself a driver of some of the things that we believe happen in cities, like innovation, wealth creation? That debate has been going on back and forth. I would say that slowly over time, the evidence seems to be indicating that population size is a driver, much more than a consequence. So the initial empirical starting point for the scaling work is that population size is an important feature of cities. That is not an observation that's unique, certainly to us or physicists, by the way. And I want to emphasize, because it's a literature that certainly in economics we don't often come into contact with, but it's quite fascinating if you're interested in cities, which is the work done by archaeologists and anthropologists in trying to understand the consequence of population size, not just in cities. You know, after all, we lived in villages long before we lived in cities, and even before that, for the bulk of our existence as a species, we were hunter-gatherers. And there's also evidence that the dynamics of hunter-gatherer groups were very crucially affected by their size. Okay, and there's some very interesting work that argues that to be human is to agglomerate. And one of the reasons why we can agglomerate, by which we mean we form social groups that are not exclusively based on kinship. Okay? That in order to do that, that is one of the most important cognitive differences between us and our near relatives. So I just want to point out some fantastic work that anthropologists have been trying to do, studying the structure of social groups across hominids, that includes us, the chimpanzees, of which there are at least 4 types, gorillas, so on and so forth. And one thing that seems to be uniquely human, is that we can tolerate to be in the presence of non-relatives for a long time. I mean, that's quite striking. Chimpanzees don't do that. Those are closest relatives. A chimpanzee social group are almost exclusively formed out of family relationship, kinship, and when it gets to be a little bit large for carrying capacity, they split up. There's no evidence of scale benefits to chimpanzees, whereas humans have been doing this for a long time. This was the basis of hunter-gathering. Okay? So we've been agglomerating for a long time before cities. So one should not equate cities with agglomeration. One can think of cities as the consequence of a long process of agglomeration that seems to have begun about 200,000 years ago. Okay? The other things that we do, the chimpanzees don't do. I mean, this is a fun game, you can play with archaeologists. So next time you're going to a park, someone says, oh, well, can you tell me all the things that are different between us and chimpanzees? One of them is we agglomerate, they don't. And the other one is, this is quite important. It turns out, we try to understand how we diverse with them. We swim and they don't. Sorry. That's why we swim. We can do this. Which is why chimpanzee populations are very specially bounded. Because the most effective way to limit the movement of chimpanzee group is build a river around them. And they won't cross it. So anyway, I can go on for hours about trivial facts of chimpanzees, but I won't. I don't know why I became so fascinated by them. Well, yes, of course, there's so much like us, but then we'll see this. So that intuition, I just want to capture. So, but then what is it about scaling? So fine, we agglomerate. Certainly lots of people have pointed that out. Lots of emphasis on agglomeration. Yes, population size matters. that is an important feature of hunter-gatherer groups, of villages, of towns, of cities. What is it about scaling analysis that makes it plausible to think that we can do the theory of cities? So now we're going to get a little bit into the details and the math. But
So the question on this size of city thing, is this an absolute scale or a relative scale? And what motivating this question is that I come from a small country, Israel, where the largest city there has 600,000 people, which in America would be considered not an especially important big city. And yet the function of this big city has the same function as
yes.
New York or Chicago or LA, even though obviously on a smaller scale. So do you guys also distinguish between that? Also, London in the Middle Ages was like 14,000 people or something, and it was still the main thing.
Or Chicago will be considered small compared to some Chinese cities.
Right.
So this spatial population size, both from the perspective of an urban system.
Yeah.
So if you think it's hard to answer the question, what's a city, what's an urban system? So it's both a relative feature,
Yeah.
but also there is some evidence that the actual size itself. So the
So
things
there's
that,
an absolute number.
so to disentangle absolute scale effects and relative scale effects, that becomes an empirical challenge. So let's get into it. What's scaling analysis? Okay. So this is a technique that was born out of physics. Okay, I will not go into the details of that, but let's say that scaling analysis is very, 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 very important if you want to build the type of device that is not one that we encounter in our daily lives, nuclear bombs. Okay, but if you want to build a nuclear bomb and have some idea how it will work, that was the beginning of scaling analysis, and it's simply a mathematical statement that you have some variable y that measures some feature that you are interested in. Let's say explosive power of a bomb or metabolic rate of an animal, and you believe it has the following relationship to the size of the system that you're interested in, where size is captured by m. Look at this equation. This looks like a very innocent equation. Okay? I mean, it has a very impressive name, power function. But as equations go, that is tremendously simple. Yet, the beauty of this relationship is that if you do obtain that relationship between y and m, it constrains the system to behave in very specific ways. Okay? But all scaling needs, all it means to say y and x have a scaling relationship is that y will be a function of x, in this case n, raised to some power beta. Okay? Wow, that seems like a very inauspicious beginning for a big claim. Okay? Now, what is the significance of scaling? Perhaps we will not get here into some of these math details, but we can do so afterwards. If you believe that there is this relationship, okay, from that relationship, it follows that you have an even more mystical quality, that of self-similarity. Okay? Which means that you're dealing with a system that can express itself in a variety of sizes, and everything that differs from those different instantiations is solely a function of size. This sounds very abstract, and perhaps the best way to capture why this self-similarity is so awesome will be through an actual example. So we can skip some of this math, but I think discussing the use of scaling analysis in the biological domain will capture why I think scaling is so awesome. Let me see if I get you to agree. So this is my goal. By the end of this talk, that you will believe scaling is really awesome. Okay? Let's see. Okay? And one of the places outside of physics where scaling had a huge analytical success is in the domain of biology, and that is the work that first inspired our work in physics. Okay?
So scaling and fractals, in this sense, related?
Yes. So this is the economist in me. Yes and no. You probably heard that joke, economists, it's very hard to pin us down, yes, no. They are related, but you have to do a fair amount of manipulation. So the relationship is not as obvious. But yes. Yes, I qualified yes. Okay. But, okay, so biology, you probably all agree, you look out, one of the obvious things about the biological domain is that some things are large and some things are big. There's you, there's a little, what's that animal, what's it called, gerbil? Gerbil? That runs in a little hill. Hamster, blue whale, okay? So for a long time it was very obvious to biology, it's like, wow, there's this size range. And it seems to be very important, okay? Here is the really amazing thing about this. Okay, when biologists, and this started about 1836, when biologists started measuring the following. They started comparing the relationship between the size of an organism, in which case mass, because mass is related to number of cells. Okay? So what's the size of an organism? And one very, very, very important feature of organisms. Okay, this is a little side trip into biology. Okay, what is the main difference between you and? Oh, sorry. Okay, I was going to. Okay, I need. And what's the main difference between you and this cup? Okay, there's you. There's this cup. What's the big difference? You have hopes, you have dreams, you have aspirations, you love, you hate. Nah, that's
Carbon.
trivial.
Carbon.
This probably has a lot of carbon in here. You need energy to be you. These things, we can, if we were to put this in the moon in a certain place, we could come back in a million years and still be there. Isn't that remarkable? We can put this in the moon. Make sure there's hit by meteorites. Go away for a billion years, come back, it will still be there. Unchanged. A testament to the Eric and English Niche Foundation. For you, whatever you are, you need a continuous injection of energy. The moment energy is withdrawn from you, well, not the moment, it will last for 2 weeks, but then you will cease being you. You'll be something else. Okay? So, for a biologist, the essence of organism is energy. Energy is what allows you to be complex and organized. Energy is what allows your cells in the brain to operate the way they do, so you have hopes and dreams and aspirations. But those are a byproduct. Those are accidents.
What about cars?
Cars are not an automaton. You have to inject that energy. They're not self-replicating. So, when biologists noticed that, they did this. You might have seen this before. This is about as close as biology comes to a natural law. Yes, we all have physics envy. We all envy physicists because they have laws. And we would like to have laws. So biology explains, we have one law. It's called allometric scaling. When you do this, you compare the relationship between the mass of an organism and its metabolic rate. Okay? How much energy does it need? Now you can decide to measure in watts per minute, but how much energy does it need? Now, mind you, this is not an easy thing to measure, okay? I mean, just imagine how hard it is, to measure energy. Well, at least in the case of a human, you can stick a tube into you. Try measuring the energy of a gorilla, of a greyback shark, of a little cockroach. It's pretty impressive to see this work, where scientists put this tiny instrument in the back of cockroaches to measure the metabolic intake. And when you do, and you express it in log, you get this. Okay, is this mind blowing or what? It's a straight line. Okay,
Yes,
say it
it's
again.
mind blowing.
It's a straight line.
Where's tasteless?
Yes, it's a straight line. You don't get straight lines in the universe. I mean, whenever you plot two variables and you get a straight line, either someone has done hanky-panky with the data, or you have discovered something. This is striking. And what's striking about this is, this goes from, mastodons, the human beings are somewhere here, to other organisms, algae. And what this plot says, from the standpoint of energy use, which some will argue is really what matters about life, it says that the only difference between an amoeba and me
The only difference is our size. That's it. I am an amoeba many times larger. Now you can find that either very depressing or fantastic. If you find that fantastic, then I think I can persuade you what follows. If you find that really depressing, but this was just extraordinary, okay? This is something that biologists have known for some time, and even today, by the way, there is still an ongoing. There's a repository kept whereby, let's say, if you decide to get your PhD, you can, let's say, you decide, you know, I want to measure the metabolic rate of a species for which it has not been measured before. You know, there's a type of termite found in the Southwest that's very nasty. I'm going to measure the metabolic rate, figure out how to do it, get your dissertation, get your PhD, get a job, and you can put that data in this ongoing body of data. So that this is a relationship that continues to be explored. But for a long time, biologists knew, okay, why? What's behind this straight line? Okay? If you look at data long enough, you know that if there's a straight line, there's something that has to be going on. And the question is, what? What was going on? And some researchers, primarily Jeffrey West, John Brown, Brian Enquist, other colleagues, but this was a team, they brought to the question of what was behind that what, okay, tools from the study of scaling in physics, and that what their reason is, what every organism has in common is that energy, once, you know, first energy has to be obtained. It's obtained primarily through chemical interactions, but then that energy has to be distributed. And the way nature has stumbled upon distributing energy is through networks. And the networks that biology uses to distribute energy have certain common mathematical properties. Yes, one of them being fractality, kind of awesome. And so you could argue that, so they argue that what was behind this relationship that relates size to energy consumption is the way natural selection has found to distribute energy, which is through networks, and networks of a certain characteristic, not just any type of network, there's certain types of networks. And what West, Brown, and Enquist did, and this is every social scientist fantasy, okay, you build a model, that's what you believe, you get very excited, can you put that in a set of equations, can you explain existing data, and can you make predictions which have not been made before? And they did all that, and as a consequence, biologists now believe that we have an answer to what's behind this mind-blowing relationship, which by now you all agree that's really mind-blowing in a wholesome way. Okay? So, okay, our work, so the starting point about 10 years ago, actually yes, it will be 10 years ago in September, Jeffrey West, gathered some of us, said, size matters for organisms. I think size matters for cities. Yes, definitely it does. So there be a scaling relationship, and if there is, could it be similarly explained? So that was the actual beginning. If you want to know how this whole thing started like that. Okay. Now, bear in mind, because I'll come back to this. There's one humongously important feature of biological scaling, humongously important, which is that larger organisms are slower, meaning they move slower and they live longer. Okay? This is a feature of biology. As you will see in a moment, one of the first things that we find out is that most decidedly this metaphor of the city as an organism is fundamentally flawed. Because cities do not slow down as they get larger. They actually speed up. Okay? So that was the beginning of that. But then, what we had to do was look at the data. In some cases, revisit data that have already been examined. In some cases, examine data anew. We were just trying to see, is there a systematic relationship between whatever we can measure in cities that we think is cool? What do you like about cities? That they create wealth? That they're the source of most inventions? Violent crime? Well, that might not be cool, but it's something that human beings do with each other, that's social. Just, what is it? And population size, okay? And can you find a scaling relationship? Not just a relationship. Of course, it's bound to be a relationship. Yes, I believe sociology 101, you put lots of people together, and yes, probably some of them are going to kill each other. Yeah, that's my whole sociology, yes. Is there a systematic relationship? And we began to do that, and we started finding out things like this. Wow! Isn't that also mind-blowing? It's a straight line. So this is a scaling relationship between population size and total wages for US metropolitan areas in, I believe, 2006, okay? And we began to find evidence statistically that indicated wherever we could get data, that there was a scaling relationship. Remember what scaling relationship is. Y is a function of n raised to some scaling coefficient beta. And yes, you have to do some careful statistical work, okay? So maybe to maybe shortchange, I mean, if you were, depending upon the type of audience, I could have you completely enthralled by showing you scatter plot after scatter plot, but I think they're a little bit more sophisticated than that. But it's cool to look at scatter plots like this. But the main thing that I want to contrast is, after having looked at all that data, is that we and others began to find two very distinct types of scaling relationships, which is what began to give us a hint about theory construction. There are things you can measure about a city, whatever we think the city is, that has to do with physical infrastructure. Length of roads, length of sidewalks, how many cables are there in the city transporting electricity. You can also measure the consumption of physical things like water, electricity, or you can measure the generation of waste. Those are very physical things. And then you can measure things that are kind of clearly the result of social interactions. Wealth, wages, pay patterns. You know, you can, doing some funky data work, you can measure how many patents come out of Chicago.